Hi you guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today's case I actually had not heard of until last week, but this case is very well known in Canada and it hasn't really been reported on here in the United States, but I definitely wanted to cover it because this case is extremely interesting and it has baffled Canadian investigators for over a decade now, so I definitely wanted to cover it. One disclaimer that I do want to throw out is that a lot of the reporting that was done on this story is in French, so I do not speak French fluently, and so I tried to do the best that I could in terms of getting the information into the video, and I know that I will probably butcher some of the pronunciation of some of the words, and so I apologize in advance, and I just don't speak French fluently. I know some, but not enough to say certain places correctly, so I just wanted to put that out there. Today, we are going to be talking about the extremely bizarre disappearance of MARILYN Bergeron. MARILYN Bergeron was born on December 21st, 1983 in Chicoutimi, Quebec, Canada. As a young child and for all of her life, music was extremely important to MARILYN, and by the age of 10 she had already begun to take music lessons. While she was in high school, MARILYN spent a significant amount of time actually trying to put a band together, and she spent a lot of her time pursuing her musical interests in extracurricular activities. MARILYN was open to and fascinated by all different kinds of cultures and nationalities, and her openness is what led to, in MARILYN's mother Andre's words, MARILYN being somewhat reckless and surrounding herself with bad influences. MARILYN spoke her native French in addition to English and was also learning Spanish and Russian. MARILYN went on to earn a degree in media arts and technology. After earning her degree, she continued to take classes in Juliet. In 2005, MARILYN moved to Montreal and worked as a sales assistant at Steve's Music Store. In addition to that, she also earned a living by doing some freelance sound editing work for some local TV stations. However, MARILYN had her eyes set on a completely different career and wanted to become a flight attendant and moved to Western Canada within a few years. MARILYN's friends described her as being cheery, upbeat, and positive. However, all of that would suddenly and drastically change in 2008, just 3 years after she moved to Montreal. According to friends, MARILYN started to become extremely withdrawn, scared, fearful, and depressed. Her friend Jonathan, whom she had met in college, said that he had reconnected with MARILYN in late 2007. He said that on December 10th, he went over to MARILYN's apartment to meet up so that they could attend a party together. However, Jonathan was shocked to see the demeanor of his old friend. Instead of being her usual upbeat and positive self, he said that she appeared to be extremely depressed and was listening to music in the dark. He said that when they finally got to the party, MARILYN's mood became more upbeat, and at that point he assumed that maybe he just got to her apartment at a bad time, or maybe she was having a rough day and that all was well. However, MARILYN's mood changed quickly again after she had a conversation with a friend of hers. To Jonathan, it seemed like the conversation almost reminded MARILYN of an unpleasant memory, and immediately after this conversation, she asked to go home. When they returned back to the apartment, MARILYN became even more despondent and began to cry continuously. Jonathan at that point had no idea what to do and tried to calm her down, but he said that MARILYN was unresponsive. Jonathan, still unsure of what to do at this point, began to ask MARILYN questions, and he asked her if she had been sexually assaulted or if she had witnessed a murder, and MARILYN denied both of those things. She went on to tell him that what she had experienced was much worse. Jonathan was understandably extremely concerned at this point and asked her what had happened, but MARILYN refused to tell him. He said that he spent the next 3 to 4 hours trying to calm her down and again asking her what had happened, and all MARILYN said was, "You can't even begin to imagine what I've been through, Joe." Even though MARILYN never told him what had happened to her, Jonathan was under the impression that she was withholding the information because she didn't want to put him in danger. Around 2 months later, MARILYN contacted her parents and said that she no longer felt safe in Montreal and that she wanted to come back home to Quebec. Her mother, Andre, asked her what had happened. Obviously, her mother was extremely confused at this point, but MARILYN refused to tell her and said that she would tell her when she was back in Quebec. On Sunday, February 10th, 2008, MARILYN traveled to Quebec City and arrived at her parents' home. Within 7 days, MARILYN would go missing and would vanish without a trace. When MARILYN arrived back home, it was obvious to her parents that something was deeply troubling her, and she stated that she never wanted to go back to Montreal. Over the next few days, her mother Andre continued to ask her what had happened, and Marilyn would not give her an answer. Apparently, shortly after Marilyn arrived at her parents' house, she was on the phone with her sister Natalie and asked her, "Is there light at the end of this tunnel?" Natalie was obviously concerned as well and asked Marilyn what had happened, and when she asked Marilyn that, she said all Marilyn did was burst into tears. Her mother Andre became increasingly worried because she just simply couldn't understand why Marilyn would want to leave her apartment so suddenly and also refuse to go back to the city that she had lived in for the past 3 years. Andre began to ask questions just like Marilyn's friend Jonathan did a few months earlier. Reportedly, Marilyn specifically denied that it had anything to do with drugs, debts, or a relationship. However, when she asked Marilyn if she had been sexually assaulted, Marilyn neither confirmed nor denied it. According to her mother Andre, after she was asked this question, Marilyn's face took on a pained expression and she began to cry. Andre then told her daughter that if she was unable to speak to her about it, that she needed to speak to a psychologist or a specialist that could help her. On Friday, February 15th, Marilyn returned to Montreal with her parents to begin packing up all of her belongings from her apartment and eventually ended up spending the evening with her friends. The next day, on February 16th, Marilyn and her parents finished up packing and headed back to Quebec City. With Marilyn back in Quebec, her parents hoped that she would find some relief and seek the appropriate help that she needed. The next day, on February 17th, Marilyn told her parents that she was going to go for a walk and that she would be home in a few hours. She left her parents' home wearing a long black overcoat with gray fake fur and suede boots. Marilyn had a black backpack with her and her credit card. However, she left all other forms of her identification at the home. Shortly after 11 a.m., Marilyn was spotted on ATM footage trying to withdraw $60 from her bank account. However, this transaction was declined. Throughout the video, Marilyn is seen looking behind herself, almost as if she's looking for someone or as if she's afraid that someone is watching her. At 4:03 p.m., Marilyn bought a cup of coffee at the Cafe Depot, which was about 16 miles away from her family's home. She paid for the coffee with the same credit card that she used at the ATM machine, and according to the barista that served her, she seemed depressed and eager to leave the store. After Marilyn left the Cafe Depot, and just 7 days after she first came back to Quebec, Marilyn went missing and was never seen again, and her credit card has never been used. When she vanished without a trace, Marilyn was 24 years old, 5'7", had brown hair, green eyes, and weighed 115 pounds. She also had a distinctive Pegasus tattoo between her right breast and right shoulder that could be seen if she was wearing low-cut tops. After Marilyn did not return home that evening, her parents became very concerned and called the Quebec City Police and reported her missing. The police immediately began to search the area and distributed flyers and put a huge emphasis on that Pegasus tattoo because it was so unique. They put up a $10,000 reward and hoped that tips from the public would help them in their investigation. However, nothing led them to Marilyn. Since Marilyn was last seen 16 miles away from her home, the immediate question was, how did she get there? Yes, it was possible that she could have walked that entire distance. However, her family believed that somebody had driven her there or that she hitched a ride. Police, for some reason, refused to release the ATM footage of Marilyn until a year later on the anniversary of her disappearance. They asked for the public to come forward and specifically asked for anyone to come forward if they remembered driving her that day. However, they received very little information and 2 years passed. In 2010, a man came forward and said that he had seen Marilyn in Hawkesbury, Ontario, just over the Ottawa River from Quebec. He said that he had seen her regularly over the year before he called and that she was staying with a man. When police followed up on this, regular customers at a diner in the area recalled seeing Marilyn with a man when the police showed them her photo. However, after that, nothing really happened in the case. Several times during the years, Marilyn's family has appealed to the Ministry of Public Security to have Marilyn's case transferred over to the Quebec Provincial Police or the Montreal Police. The Quebec Provincial Police had a province-wide jurisdiction and were also known to be the most effective and capable law enforcement agency. They also asked for it to be transferred over to the Montreal Police because that's where Marilyn's life began to unravel, and they believed that her friends in that area might hold some more answers. The Bergerons were frustrated with the Quebec City Police because they really were just treating Marilyn's disappearance as a disappearance, and they basically said that she most likely committed suicide, but they never really looked into the possibility of criminal criminal involvement. However, each time the Bergerons made the request to have the case transferred, they were denied. In 2015, the Bergerons personally pleaded with then-Minister Lise Therault, not sure if I pronounced that right, and they were again denied. In February of 2017, the Bergerons held a press conference with their lawyer, Marc Bellemare, who was a former provincial justice minister, and upped the reward to $30,000. They again asked the public to come forward with any information that they had, and also said that they were going to create a tip line. The family later held a second press conference and said that the tip line had generated 43 reports of sightings. However, nothing has really moved forward, and MARILYN has still not been found. That is pretty much all the information I could find on this case. There wasn't a lot of information to begin with. Again, it's very well known in Canada, but not here. Most of the articles were in French, and since I don't speak French fluently, I wasn't able to fully understand all of the articles and was only able to really look at articles that had been translated into English. So there isn't a whole lot of information about this case, and when I went online to even see if other people were discussing the case, there really wasn't much of a discussion. When it comes to theories, they're kind of endless because of the lack of evidence and because MARILYN literally vanished. There are a couple of theories, and I will include them in the video, but again, not much is known because we don't really have that much information. Obviously, something was clearly upsetting MARILYN to the point that she abandoned her apartment and moved out of it and literally left the city of Montreal. The first theory is that MARILYN was suffering from some mental illness which made her believe that she was unsafe and in danger. The two mental illnesses that I saw brought up the most were paranoid schizophrenia and paranoid personality disorder. Both of these are very different, but they do have some similarities, and one similarity between the two is mistrust of others. We hear about paranoid schizophrenia quite a bit, but I personally have never heard of paranoid personality disorder. I am not a psychologist or mental health professional, but I did do some basic research on both illnesses. When I looked at paranoid personality disorder, the symptoms were suspicion, concern with hidden motives, social isolation, poor self-image, and detachment. People living with this disorder will not confide in other people, even if those people are trustworthy, because they are afraid of being exploited or betrayed. People with this disorder may also appear calculating and cold because they don't really want to be close to other people. To me, MARILYN's actions were different. She did reach out to people, and she reached out to her family asking for help. Another trait that people with paranoid personality disorder have is self-sufficiency. And to me, MARILYN was definitely relying heavily on her family at this time. She immediately called out to them and said, I am not safe here, and she said that she wanted to move home. So to me, she was definitely relying on other people. Within days, she was packed up and moved back to her parents' house. She displayed a lot of emotion and almost seemed ashamed or too afraid to tell her parents about what happened to her. Her friend Jonathan also said that he felt that MARILYN didn't tell him what had happened to her because she was trying to protect him. Now, people with paranoid schizophrenia have paranoid delusions, which is where they believe that everyone is after them even if evidence proves otherwise. They also tend to have auditory hallucinations where they hear voices actually speaking to them. Again, I don't have a lot of experience with mental illness, but it's definitely possible that MARILYN was maybe suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. However, she never really showed any signs of hearing voices, and from everything that I've read up on, anytime she was asked about what had happened to her, she didn't really necessarily seem paranoid, she just seemed really upset. She was uncontrollably crying and even asked her sister if there was light at the end of the tunnel. To me, it almost seemed as if MARILYN asked this question because she was wondering if she would ever be able to get over the shame and the fear that she was feeling. From everything that I've read, MARILYN never directly said that someone was after her. She continually said that something bad had happened to her and that she no longer felt safe. If MARILYN was suffering from some sort of mental illness, it's absolutely possible that she felt that she was no longer safe and that maybe someone was after her, which is why she went back home to live with her family. Maybe on her walk on the day that she went missing, she was just completely wrapped up in her own head and wandered off and decided to just leave it all behind. The second theory is that MARILYN was in some sort of emotional distress or was suffering from a mental illness and decided to take her own life. This is apparently what investigators keep leaning towards, if they're leaning towards anything, and is also why her parents desperately want the case to be transferred over to another law enforcement agency. From everything that I've read, the police have failed to look at other avenues. They've just basically decided to be okay with the fact that Marilyn went missing and probably committed suicide. This is absolutely possible, but I don't understand why Marilyn would want to pack up all of her belongings and move back to Quebec if she just wanted to take her own life. They searched the area extensively multiple times, and Marilyn was never found, and neither were any of her belongings. Of course, it is always possible that they missed something and that they haven't found her yet. The third theory is that something actually did happen to Marilyn and she met with foul play or chose to disappear. In my opinion, I think that this scenario is the most likely one. I don't know if Marilyn met with foul play or if she chose to disappear because she was so afraid of what had happened to her. Again, if we look at what happened to Marilyn, there was a dramatic shift in her personality in late 2007. According to her friend Jonathan, who went to that party with her on December 10th, Marilyn was noticeably different. He said that when she spoke to her friend at that party, she became panicked almost, wanted to go home, and later at her apartment became inconsolable, and that he had spent 3 to 4 hours trying to figure out what had happened to her. What she told him was interesting. She said that whatever happened to her was worse than sexual assault and murder. The very thought of that freaks me out. What could have happened to her that is worse than those two things? When her mother asked her what happened, she gave a slightly different answer. She said that it had nothing to do with drugs, debt, or a relationship, but would not answer her mother when her mother asked her if she had been sexually assaulted. Is it possible that Marilyn was in fact sexually assaulted by someone in Montreal and she was worried that that person was following her? The day she went missing, Marilyn said she wanted to go for a walk. A little interesting since she had just packed up her whole life because she said she didn't feel safe. Maybe she thought she was safe now that she was in Quebec. When you look at the ATM footage, it's clear that Marilyn keeps looking behind herself as if she is searching for someone or as if she is literally afraid that somebody is following her. She also went there to take $60 out, but as we know, it was declined. She then used that same credit card to buy herself a coffee at the Cafe Depot. What were the $60 for? Why was Marilyn trying to withdraw money that day? There's also the fact that Marilyn even ended up at the Cafe Depot, which is 16 miles away from her family's home. Again, it is possible that she walked that distance, but to me it seems more likely that she was either driven there or she hitched a ride. Could the person who did something to her in Montreal have followed her to Quebec? Did they use Marilyn's walk as an opportunity to take her? Or did she hitch a ride from a random stranger? Did that person maybe harm Marilyn? Or did Marilyn choose to disappear? I think that this is the most likely scenario. I think that Marilyn did see something or that something awful happened to her and caused her to withdraw from those closest to her and is what ultimately made her pack up her belongings and move back to Quebec. I think that Marilyn was either too ashamed or too afraid to name that person to her friend or her family when they asked her what happened. I also think it's very interesting that Marilyn would not confirm nor deny sexual assault when her mother had asked what had happened to her. I think that whoever did something to Marilyn probably threatened her, and that is why she no longer felt safe in Montreal and is why she decided to move back to Quebec. I think in her panicked mind she may have thought that Quebec was far enough away and that this person wouldn't follow her. When I looked at the distance between Montreal and Quebec, it's only about 3 hours away. So not a huge distance, but I think in Marilyn's mind maybe it was a far enough distance to get away from her problems. I think that when she got there, she still felt unsafe and thought that there was still a possibility that that person could have traveled to Quebec and followed her, or maybe she saw that person. Maybe that's what she was looking at when she was at the ATM and she chose to disappear. To me, this would explain why Marilyn left all of her identification at home. If you are trying to start a new life, it would make sense that you would leave everything that identifies you behind. I think she took her credit card with her that day because she wanted to withdraw as much money as she could so that it could help her disappear. Maybe she helped pack up all of her belongings in Montreal so that after she went missing, that burden wouldn't be left on her parents. Maybe she planned from the beginning, even when she was still in Montreal, that she was going to go missing. To me, it also explains the multiple sightings of Marilyn in Hawkesbury, Ontario from multiple people. If people are independently saying that they've seen Marilyn in the same area, I would think that there is something there, but I honestly don't know. This case honestly threw me because there is literally zero evidence. If there is evidence, the police haven't released it to the public, and so it's really hard to even think about what might have happened to MARILYN that day. It's possible that MARILYN was suffering from some sort of mental illness. It's possible that something horrific happened to her. It's possible that she met foul play. It's possible that she took her own life. It's possible that she chose to disappear and start a new life. What happened to MARILYN that day, and where is she now? MARILYN has been missing for 10 years and 23 days. None of MARILYN's belongings have ever been found. There is no proof that MARILYN isn't alive. MARILYN deserves a thorough investigation, and her family deserves closure. This case has baffled the Canadian police for over a decade. Canada has actually one of the best track records to locate missing persons, and this case has literally stumped them. It's just so hard to rule anything out because of the complete lack of evidence. All I know is that people can decide to go missing. If they're an adult, they can leave their life and start a new one. It happens all the time. People do it for a variety of reasons. So whatever happened to MARILYN, and I don't know if we'll ever really know, all I can hope is that wherever MARILYN may be, is that she feels safe and is at peace. So I don't really know for sure what happened. I guess I kind of laid out a mini theory as to what I thought happened, but I'm very interested to hear what your opinions on this case are. Do you think that MARILYN actually had something happen to her that was just so awful she couldn't tell her friends and family? Do you think that MARILYN maybe met with foul play? Do you think that MARILYN is no longer alive? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up for me, and don't forget to subscribe because I will be posting more videos like this in the upcoming weeks. And with that, I'm going to go. Thank you so much for watching this video. Bye.